Read bits. Reddit, what is your best I won't tell if you won't tell story? On vacation a couple of years ago, a best bud of mine and I ended up sleeping with a girl in between us. She was locked out of her room, and smooth as we were, we had moved two single beds together to form a big one for all of us to sleep in. We ended up holding hands for about 10 minutes, only to discover the girl had gone to sleep and we were actually two guys holding hands from across and beneath the chick. When I finally got to thinking, this girl has a pretty big hand, my friend whispered, "Alex4049? Are you holding hands with someone?" I quietly responded, "Maybe," and we both immediately released each other's hand, and we went to sleep. We never spoke of it again. TLDR, a friend and I ended up holding hands, both thinking we were in the process of getting a good time with a girl. Similar thing happened to me, but I was awake. There were two guys sleeping on each side. We were all smushed into a tent. I semi-awoke to hands rubbing, all molester-like. But they started rubbing each other. I just stayed asleep, and I think they finally figured it out. I was at Coachella and found a bathroom trailer that was air-conditioned, had cold running water, and two private stalls. I was in there by myself when someone else came in and said, "No way. This is amazing. Is this like for industry people or something?" He saw my shoes under the door and went, "Dude, what is this place? Don't tell anyone," I told him. He said, "No way, dude. I haven't even seen your face. This is our secret. We're like ships in the night, bro. Pooping in peace among 100,000 person crowd is a really valuable secret to keep." Anonymous festival friends are the best type of friends. Manager and I closed up the store. Both of us thought the other one locked the doors. Came out of the back room to people shopping in the dark. It's a night we don't talk about. Confirmed, sometime in 2006, we did the usual pre-closing song and dance of running around the store telling everyone that we're closing in 5 minutes, yada yada yada. Once we had seen everyone out, my coworker and I locked up, turned off the music, turned off the lights, counted out all the money, and were gabbing loudly about being glad to be going home. Just as we were about to set the alarm and leave the store, a woman came out from the darkness and asked if she could pay for the spool of thread she wanted to purchase. Scared the life out of us. How did we not notice her in our small store, you ask? Well, she had been crouched, hidden under a table so she wouldn't have to leave. Crazy. I was in New Orleans for a wedding once, and they served an ungodly amount of deep-fried food that simultaneously clogged up my anus and begged for the sweet, nurturing embrace of toilet water. We went to Bourbon Street after the reception, and I finally felt confident in my ability to drop the remnants of dinner at a seedy-looking bar, the bathroom of which had no latch. Never mind a lock. I opted to postpone the festivities. By the time we reached the next bar, the situation had changed somewhat, and my search for a toilet had become more desperate. Upon entering the men's room, I found a single toilet with no walls and a horse trough of a urinal. It was too late to be picky, so I dropped my drawers and sat down for the long haul. The part that's relevant to the story was when a burly-looking Eastern European man walked in, let his gaze linger at my pasty paunches, then announced, "Your business is your business, and my business is my business." Okay? I assented miserably and watched as he pulled a packet of cocaine out of his pocket, snorted some off of his finger, nodded curtly at me, and walked out. That was a pretty fun vacation, all things considered. TLDR, I shit in front of an Eastern European cokehead. My dad wanted to go to the movies back in 1979. My mother said, "No problem, just take Mad Lintelf with you." He said, "Sure," and we got to the theater. We looked to see what is playing, and he immediately buys tickets for the movie 10, starring Bo Derek and Dudley Moore. The theater was packed almost exclusively by men. We had to sit separately. I was only 12 years old at the time and didn't have that much exposure to, let alone. During the movie, my dad kept looking back at me and I just smiled. After the movie, my dad told me that we cannot tell mom that he took me to that movie. We agreed to say we went to see something else. Best night ever. Best movie I ever saw with my dad as well. With as in the same theater, not sitting next to each other. If he was next to me, he would have covered my eyes during the best parts. I was, and still am, a huge nerd, but I keep most of it quiet in high school, only admitting to the mainstream stuff, video games and superhero movies. One day in my sophomore year, I went to an anime convention in full cosplay when, lo and behold, I lock eyes with a guy from my school, also decked out in a ridiculous cosplay costume. We had been classmates for a few years, and the entire time he had been sort of a jock and very anti-nerd. We exchanged knowing looks and never spoke a word of it the next 2 years. I went to a very tech-oriented university, and while there I worked at an upscale adult boutique. I was on register and was checking out a middle-aged guy and his wife. They had quite a few purchases, so I was making small talk in the meantime. The guy said he had just returned from E3, and I asked some questions related to new games coming out at the time. He eventually mentioned that he taught game programming at a nearby school, which narrowed it down to 3. I asked him if it was school A or B, the most likely guesses, and he told me it was school A, my school. I simply responded with, "Cool," but he asked where I attended school, so I told him. Awkward silence after that. The only thing I could think to ask was if they needed batteries for their vibrating nipple clamps they usually take, those annoying watch/disc batteries. Had him for class about 6 weeks later. I got a pointed stare the first time he took roll, and I believe we came to a silent understanding in those few seconds. Never saw them in the store again. Kinda felt bad after that. Me and a coworker were finishing taking the trash out at the end of our shift at work. The night manager was an asshole, and we already had to stay later than we were supposed to do some of the stuff that she didn't want to. As we were coming out of the back room, this guy ran straight past us to the bathroom, covering his mouth and spewing puke. Normally, we would have had to clean it up, but if we weren't there, the responsibility would fall on the closing manager. My coworker just looked at me and said, "I didn't see anything, you?" I said no, and we both left. I was the best man in my best friend's wedding several years ago. His little sister, 18 at the time of the wedding, is really f***ing hot and always seems sort of flirty with me. Anyway, the wedding ceremony was a blast, and I was dancing with her parents, my buddy's new wife, etc. I was given a stern warning by my buddy, the groom, as well as his older brother not to mess with the little sister. In my drunken state, I cast all concerns aside, and the rest of the story is predictable. My buddy knocked on my door the next morning, and she took her clothing and hid in the closet. Heart was pounding. Suffice to say, we agreed to take the events of that night to our grave. I hate brothers like that. It's just stupid. It's denial at its worst. If I don't see it, it doesn't happen. It's not like she isn't going to get the shit railed out of her by somebody, probably many somebodies. And your whining and complaining and threatening is only gonna mess her up psychologically. It's actually quite selfish if you think about it. The brother is only doing it for the sake of his own feelings, not to actually help or protect his sister. In fact, he's actually harming his sister, and for the sake of his own personal feelings, no less. Really, really selfish, actually. When I was about 13 years old, a friend and myself were in the woods near a pond behind our houses, had a can of WD-40 and a lighter. We went all around the pond, lighting giant anthills on fire. We didn't look behind ourselves for quite some time. Needless to say, there was a giant wildfire when we finally looked back. We ran to the school that was close by and watched it burn until the fire department came and put it out. We destroyed a wetland, although it was turned into a residential area a few years later. Have never told anyone until now. Thanks for watching! Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. What's your best I won't tell if you don't story?